champion, an anti-war activist, and so much more. Medea Benjamin is the co-founder of a woman-led peace group CodePink. She is also co-founder of the human rights group Global Exchange, the Peace in Ukraine Coalition, Unfreeze Afghanistan, which advocates for returning the $7 billion of Afghan funds frozen in US banks. She is a co-founder. I mean, Medea, I don't know how you had time to sleep at all. And she is currently, more importantly, on a book tour with her new book, War in Ukraine, Making Sense of a Senseless Conflict. And this book is an examination of the events leading up to the 2022 conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the different parties involved, and the risk of escalation and the opportunities for peace. I want us to underline and bold and underscore that, my dear, because so many people do not talk about that part, the opportunities for peace. So in your new book, War in Ukraine, you and your co-author, Nicholas Davies, assert that the war between Russia and Ukraine is more complicated than most people understand, more complicated than most people even get the information about, that this is not just about good guys versus bad guys or bad guys versus good guys, that Russia or about Russia being bad or Ukraine being good. Why isn't it as simple as good and bad? What are the key variables about this war that so many people are getting wrong?
Well, certainly we say Russia bad and that they never should have invaded, and that was a brutal, illegal, immoral invasion that is hurting so many people every day. But we put it in context, the context of why NATO expanded to Russia's border when it promised it wouldn't, why the US was involved in the internal affairs of Ukraine, getting mucked up in the 2014 Maidan uprising, getting involved early on instead of the implementation of the Minsk Accords, sending weapons and training military. And then when the war broke out, why didn't the US get involved in trying to find a solution? Instead, stop the negotiations that were going on with the Turkish government. And more recently, we see the Chinese coming out with a peace proposal that both Zelensky and Putin are saying looks promising. And the US is saying, no, I don't think so. So our whole thing is to say, what should we be doing to push our government to be part of the solution?
Yeah, amen, indeed. And what's the end? I mean, speaking of end, the whole notion of endless wars, which you have been on the front lines pushing back against that with so many other folks. Why is it that you think Americans, that we don't necessarily get the dynamics? I mean, some people are so giddy about the bloating of the military industrial complex. They fear and feel like we must do this all the time. And I really believe that that is really what keeps a hold on the American psyche. And the same can be said for what is happening in the Ukraine. I mean, certainly Ukraine is our ally. There's no doubt about it. That Russia was wrong all day long, twice on Sunday. No doubt about that as well. But how do we sustain something like that? I mean, I don't see the United States in any way talking about finding a diplomatic solution, and that is troubling.
No, and where are the progressive Democrats in Congress, Nina? At one time, they came out back in October with a letter, 30 of them signed, saying time for negotiations, but they got so much pushback within their own party, they took back the letter, and since then, almost all of them have been silent, leaving this to mostly extreme right-wing Republicans to come out with the most rational position saying we need negotiations. So we need to get these Democrats, we need pressure on them so they hear from the American public. Only 48% of Americans now want to keep sending weapons to Ukraine. So why don't we see any questioning of this in the Congress coming from any of the Democrats? And that's why I'm traveling around the country saying, hey, put the pressure on all of them, Democrats, Republicans, whoever. What we got to do is hear more of them speaking up and pushing the White House to say, get on the peace train, get involved in finding the solutions instead of just fueling this war that the Pentagon, we see from those leaked Pentagon papers, Nina, says is a stalemate.
Yeah, absolutely on that. And since the war began, I want to put up this, the Council on Foreign Relations, since the war began, the Biden administration and the US Congress have directed more than 75 billion in assistance to Ukraine, which includes humanitarian, financial, and military support, according to the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, a German research institute. So certainly nobody, Americans are very much supportive of helping our allies, no doubt about it. This question for me, why is it in so many ways in your mind, because you are certainly an expert in this area, while we can get Republicans and Democrats to galvanize over the military industrial complex, but they don't have that same fervor and precision when it comes to domestic issues? I'm thinking child tax credit, I'm thinking about continuing to give American people relief from the COVID epidemic, which is not over. Why don't we see, and we can go on and on, why don't we see that same fervor and determination and willingness to spend money when it comes to the domestic side of the ledger and also the peace side of the ledger?
Well, we are in the grips of this military-industrial congressional complex that we were warned about by Eisenhower back in the 60s, and it's bigger and more powerful than ever, so that now we have almost $1 trillion budget when we need this money for so many other things that you talk about all the time, Nina. So the figures are now over $100 billion has gone to Ukraine. But as you well know, we can't find the money to help people in our cities. But I do want to say that the mayor's conference has said, we need money at home, find a solution in Ukraine. 1,500 faith-based leaders have said, we need to stop the killing. Let's get involved in peace talks. We have environmental leaders coming out and saying this is catastrophic for the environment. We have to do something. So we got more and more people coming on board, but it's just not getting to the members of Congress or the White House. Anybody that wants to join us, you can go to CodePink or peaceinukraine.org and join our coalition.
Thank you so much for that, Medea, and we will certainly have you back. Again, team, put up the book again one more time as we close out the segment. War in Ukraine, making sense of a senseless conflict. Pick it up and get involved. Medea Benjamin, it was such a pleasure to have you on your show, and we will definitely have you back, and good luck on your book tour.